The nationwide strike threatened by the organized labor and scheduled to begin today has been called off. This followed an agreement reached earlier this morning between the federal government and the unions on the contentious issues over deregulation of the downstream sector of the oil industry and electricity, which led to a rise in petrol price and electricity tariffs. In a desperate move to avert what could have potentially been a damaging industrial action, the meeting was initially adjourned from Thursday till today, but the contending parties were forced to return to the negotiating table late yesterday. The meeting agreed on a two-week period for the re-evaluation of the policy on deregulation, specifically measures to alleviate the impact of deregulation of the downstream sector of the oil industry was agreed upon, while the federal government committed 2 weeks to a two-week suspension of the implementation of the electricity sector's cost-reflective tariff, which came into effect on September 1. Among the agreements reached were palliative measures to cushion the effect of deregulation of the downstream sector, the timeline for revamping of refineries, and suspension of newly introduced cost-reflective tariff regime. Tundu, it looks as though we're going round in circles, round again. What's going to be the end of this game?
Is that how it appears to you?
Oh, yes.
Why?
Oh, yes. Because when you balk on this, don't forget, one of the conditions to be able to get that IMF money is cost-reflective tariff. So are we just going to suspend this and go back to this? Because we can't move forward without the cost-reflective tariff. That's why it looks as though we are just playing around for me.
Well, that's a good point. I think the idea of subsidizing consumption is ridiculous, quite frankly. But I think it's about the timing as well. Is it during a pandemic when the economy has pretty much ground to a halt that we want to yank that? We all agree that all kinds of fuel subsidies, electricity subsidies should go. But it's the timing, really, and the hardship on your average Nigerian that's the issue. But you don't see it that way. How do you see it?
Well, we can look at it from three sides. The interest of government, the interest of labor, and the interest of the people. And whether or not the strategy adopted by labor was a good strategy, or whether or not labor, organized labor in Nigeria, is not trapped in a time warp, trying to address contemporary issues with old methods. Whereas in other parts of the world, we've seen labor becoming more progressive. But that's another matter. On the part of government, for organized labor to shut down the country for whatever reason, just a few days to the celebration of October 1, will have been very big embarrassment to the country, not to even talk of the economic implications. In terms of image, that will have been a disaster. So the government officials who took part in the negotiations can give themselves a pat on the back that they've been able to stare down organized labor and prevent a strike from taking place. You will know that they had 3 different meetings. It was only at about 2:40 a.m. this morning that they were able to come up with a communique. That's one. 2, on the part of labor, you know, when labor first said they were going to protest, I asked the question whether labor actually was being sincere or they just wanted to use the same old method, make noise, pretend to be defending the interest of their members, whereas in actual fact, they really do not intend to go very far. As at yesterday, labor was in fact already divided. Some unions had, in the course of the week, issued statements. As at yesterday, petroleum marketers had said they and their workers were not going to be part of it. Now, as at this morning, when labor changed its position, organized civil society, some groups in civil society, like Enough is Enough and ASCAP, they are saying they are going to go ahead with a strike. Whether that will succeed or not is another matter entirely, in the light of the fact that there have been 2 court rulings last week imposing an injunction against organized labor from proceeding on any strike and declaring any strike today or thereafter illegal in the eyes of the law. Now, the reality is that they have reached some kind of decision about electricity tariffs and also the pump price of petrol. Now, if you look at the communique, a copy of which I have here, under the communique, they say that, yes, okay, the first is about electricity tariff reforms. And we're told that electricity tariffs have been suspended for 2 weeks. What exactly are they suspending? Okay, how would that be calculated? Now, where is the role of the discos and other stakeholders within the value chain in this? Now, a technical committee is to be set up, led by the Minister of State for Labor. And then when you look at the list of that terms of reference that they have, they say they want to examine the justification for the new policy on cost-reflective electricity tariff adjustments. What justification are they reviewing again? When the position between NEC and the DISCOs and the GENCOs was that cost-reflective tariffs will have. And since these cost-reflective tariffs, we may have issues with metering and all of that. Since they were introduced, I personally have seen some kind of perceptive improvement in the supply of electricity. And the people who benefit from this boost will be SMEs. You know, even the big companies that spend up maybe about 30 to 40% of their resources on diesel or maybe even petrol. So if we're going to have improved power supply and persons who are not, households that were not getting electricity before will begin to get electricity, there are many Nigerians who will say, well, we're ready to pay these tariffs as long as, you know, there is reduction of cost in other areas and SMEs can employ more people, big businesses can also employ more people, so it's a win-win, right? I think, okay, again, part of the terms of reference is that they will consider how members of labor can become part of the NERC, you know, and review the NERC Act. So all these people that went there, these labor leaders, were they going there to negotiate their own personal interests so that they can be on the board of NERC?
Looks like that to me.
So the other question to now raise, I think what they should be talking about should be about palliatives. What does government intend to do? I don't seem so far to have seen enough focus on that. If government is removing subsidy from electricity and from petroleum in the downstream sector, now that subsidy that is saved, what is the quantum of that savings? What will government do with the savings? They say they will remove tax on national minimum wage. Now, Labour should be talking about that minimum wage being reviewed again, perhaps. Not just about removing taxation on it. So we're not getting the right kind of conversation.
Yeah.
And then the terms of reference, in terms of palliatives, government says, oh, we will unveil that in 2 weeks' time. What kind of palliatives do they want to come up with? Is Labour negotiating that? Now, under the downstream sector, yes, Labour seems to have copped out on that. They have agreed on that. But there are also questions that they can raise. Because many of the things that government says they are going to do, these are very familiar things. We will do turnaround management of the refineries. We will do rehabilitation of the nation's 4 refineries and make sure 50% completion for Port Harcourt by December 2021. These are the same old stories we've been hearing. So I don't know the kind of team Labour sent to that meeting who do not have the capacity for rigorous engagement. They probably just sat down there and took everything hook, line, and sinker. And I'm not surprised that many Nigerians are disappointed. Even if Labour is going to say, okay, we now agree with deregulation, what kind of ideas are they bringing to the table that shows that there's some rigor and serious representation in this? So these are some of the issues of concern for me. I think the leadership of Labour will need to go and sit down and wear their thinking caps afresh and ensure that as the technical committee with regard to electricity sits and as government comes forward with some other proposals, they will be ready to interrogate this and ensure that, yes, subsidy that is saved, all the savings, they are savings that will be of use to Nigerians.
I mean, Tunde, you can now see why I said it was all a dance, because we've gone through this before, and what Labour does is, very close minute like this, they suspend the strike. They leave some newspapers in jeopardy because a particular newspaper had printed that strike continues today. I'm sure the editor will kick himself this morning that, oh my God, I didn't see what's going to happen. They will have last-minute deals, and the last-minute deals will not benefit the people. Because, take for instance, Dr. Abati, you said it all. A case of cost-reflective tariffs, it's a non-negotiable deal. And that's why when they say 2 weeks, I wonder what they're going to do in 2 weeks. We need that IMF loan. IMF have put it on the table. You need cost-reflective tariff for people to come and invest in the power sector. A lot of
you can have that, but you have the palliatives to support those who
That's true, but a lot of them, they are not talking about this now. That's why I say it's a dance. Put themselves on the NERC committee and things like that. It's always a dance. You see,
look at some of the other proposals.
Extent, that's why Nigerians don't trust Labour.
They say 10%.
It's a dance.
10% on housing, 10% will be allocated to Nigerian workers under the ongoing Ministry of Housing and Finance initiative through the NLC and
Dr.
TUC.
Abati, that one has been
and nobody could interrogate that.
That one has been
This is what they came back with.
That one has been on for a while. Dr. Abati, if you were to take a newspaper cutting from 2004, Adams Oshiomhole, when he was out protesting with Labour, and you are to juxtapose the same promises, they will almost be the same. I'm saying 2004. That housing thing has been... I was watching a documentary yesterday on housing, TUC and Labour, making it possible for workers to get housing. That has been on before.
Okay, so if Labour didn't intervene, just to play devil's advocate here, if Labour didn't intervene, the federal government would have yanked all the subsidies and nothing.
You know,
what is the
what is the slant of the intervention? What is the slant? Because it's still going to be...
Okay, and the negotiation's still not ongoing. I just refuse to be cynical about this.
Listen to this. Federal government will make available to organized labor 133 CNG, LPG driven mass transit buses immediately and provide to the major cities across the country on a scale-up basis thereafter to states and local governments. There is nothing new here. We have seen it before. So removal of tax on a minimum wage and all of that.
Okay,
so
sorry, it's the World Bank loan that we want to collect that we need cost-reflective tariff. I just needed to... Thank you so much for sending that in. I just got a message on that. It's the World Bank loan. I keep saying the IMF loan. It's the World Bank loan. Dr. Abati, you said buses. We heard the story of the buses. You remember when we had Shopee incident? It was in the government yourself. They deployed buses too. We had a lot of buses there. So it's as if it's a script you're just rehashing. Tundu, don't look at me that way.
I think
it's a script you're just rehashing.
I think for future purposes. You know, I'd raised the question before that when we were going to do all of this, was Labour consulted by government? If they had been consulted, they could have made their own input early enough, not to just go through this ritual of making noise. Oh, we don't want neoliberal policies and all that. And now you've turned around to say, oh, we now accept deregulation of the downstream sector. Oh, we will now discuss electricity tariffs. Now, what was that all that drama that they staged in the last 2 weeks?
Abati.
What was it about? If this is the point we're still going to get
Dr. Abati, being on the NERC board, does it come free?
Well, they will manage 133 buses.
Does it come free? Also. I mean, since Labour is now part of the board, does it come free? I'm not trying to be negative towards Labour this morning. Please don't get me wrong. But you see, to build a nation that is strong, a nation is incumbent on the quality of its arguments, for and against. I have not seen the robustness of arguments from Labour this morning. That's what I'm putting out there. I'm not trying to denigrate Labour in any way. But I've not seen the robustness.
We can denigrate Labour. Why not?
You know,
I mean, the leadership of Labour can be questioned.
There can be questions.
Yes, there's no problem with that.
I've not seen the robustness of the argument from Labour. Because look at it. If I give you a newspaper cutting from 2004, all these promises are things you will see. We always, like Fela says, this is old news. We've seen it before. So what was done really to help the citizenry in all of this? The people you want them to shut down their livelihood and jobs? Nothing. But the big thing I see here is them being on the board of NERC. And that's what I was asking the question, Dr. Abati. For being on there, does it come free? It doesn't. It obviously comes with the specs. So that's why a lot of people
not all of them will be there, though. If that is done, they will just have representatives who can make input. But the civil society groups that said that they are still going to go ahead with the strike, well, let's see what they do. But they should also be reminded of the court rulings, the subsisting court rulings, you know, one from the National Industrial Court, and in fact, both from the National Industrial Court. No, one from the National Industrial Court, the other from the Federal High Court. And we hope that when these civil society groups exercise their rights, the freedom to protest, the freedom of speech under the Constitution, that no security agency will brutalize them or molest them. Because I saw a headline over the weekend with the police being quoted as saying, we will deal with anybody that protests. The right to protest is a fundamental human right. The other challenge that I see, however, is that the Nigerian people themselves, I don't seem to see a connection between Labour and the people. The people seem to have moved on with the hike in electricity tariffs and the hike in pump price of petrol. So whose interest really is a Labour defender.
Dr. Abbott, it's because they've heard these tales all over again. They've seen this sequence of a dance. Labour will go negotiate last minute. They will get some small concessions, and they'll bring it back to the people that doesn't really change the life of the people. So I can say boldly that a lot of Nigerians, correct me if I'm wrong, have something I call the Labour union fatigue. When Labour says, oh, let's go on the streets again, they are quick to say, oh, we know how this is going to end. And it almost always ends the same way.
Well, we had a gentleman on this program last week who said he had himself been a Labour leader for many years and was very critical of the leadership of Labour.
He's completely unimpressed.
And he predicted this kind of outcome.
Yes, he did.
I knew this was going to happen.
Yes.
Last minute, they will get a deal in the morning. They will make some newspaper look funny. You'll be like, oh my God, I didn't see this story coming. The next thing you will have printed out that, hey, they are going to go on strike. They'll never go on strike. They'll get a tool deal. And you see, in the end of the 2 weeks, will come, will go. Agreements will be reached among them. It's not going to be corroborated to us.
With 2 weeks.
And they will move on.
If the discos choose to ignore the 2 week suspension, what is the mechanism in place for protecting the consumer? And of what value is that 2 weeks suspension? I thought they were going to say 1 year suspension. And then they will have had serious issues within the electricity sector.
Dr. Abati, we've seen this dance. That's all on News Headlines. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have the door of Rotus Adiri and Aaron Akirjala to give us updates on African business and COVID-19. Stay with us. All right, that's all on headline news. We've had that time on headlines. We'll quickly go to Rotus Adiri. I hear if Rotus is ready. Good morning, Rotus. How's it going?
I'm fine, Rufai. Good morning to you. Good morning, Doctor, and good morning to Tundu. Well, I heard your extensive discussion there on the suspension of the strike with respect to what the government has been discussing with Labour, and at some point there's a tweet from Mele Kyari which I would like us to look at, where and he said this about 3 a.m. in the morning. I was up because I was looking at all the Trump tax wahala that was going on. He says, as a former union leader, I understand Labour, I understand the difficulties of Labour leadership when faced with choices between stark realities and legitimate follower expectations. The leadership chose the pursuit of common good, and posterity will vindicate us all for standing with our country. I understand. You guys were kind of a little heavy on Labour here, but these folks have an obligation to, if you can call them their constituents, and they've got to answer to them. So, I would like to get your thoughts on, perhaps you're saying that Labour should be upfront with Nigerians and say, okay, their representatives, and say, this is the reality of things and there's nothing we can do. Is that, the position?
No, Rotus, the position, my position particularly is this. What is really Labour's argument? Because we don't even understand the thrust of an argument.
Okay.
A nation is only as strong as the thrust of varying arguments it has in the public space on issue. Is Labour following its antecedents? We don't want liberal economy and things like that. Or Labour is asking for palliatives. We can't see the trust of the argument. Okay. That is what scares me about all of this. We can't see the trust of the argument. And as regards all those promises, like we say, it's old news, it's old story. I challenge you, Rotus, take a newspaper of maybe 2004, 2005, or 2015.
Okay.
Check out the same promises during a near strike period. It's the same.
Gotcha.
We all see all of this. So for me, it's the trust of Labour's argument. They've not been able to come out, give a policy statement on their arguments.
All right, so take a look at Femi Gbajabiamila's a quote here from the Speaker of the House of Representatives. So he says, we've had a meeting with the Vice President, we've had a meeting with the executives on this issue, but the issue of electricity, we told them, that's Labour, at least wait till the first or second quarter of next year, and that is where we left it. So that's Labour. Labour wants a suspension of the increase in tariffs. Let's look at a summary of, I think Doctor said he had a copy of the communique, but there's a bit of the summary I got here. So electricity tariffs suspended for 2 weeks. They also mentioned a joint ad hoc committee to review implementation modalities. Then they talked about palliatives to cushion the effects of the increase Or why are you laughing? So they mentioned distribution of food items, payments of special allowances, timeline to revamp the refineries. I think you also mentioned busing people to offices, and I think there's something about housing. They also mentioned housing as well. So what Labour is saying here is that, look, the federal government has boxed itself into a corner by essentially not making these decisions earlier on. Now, I know back in 2012, when Goodluck Jonathan tried to do this, they came out against it as well. But the thing is, the 1-2 punch of the increase in fuel, PMS, and also the increase in electricity tariffs, all this is passing through to inflation. We're seeing inflation increasing. I find myself defending them now, but what Labour is saying is that this 1-2 punch is too much for Nigerians to bear. But anyway, I guess we'll get back to that.
Rotus, quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Okay, let's just go on. The petroleum industry bill, apparently, according to the Punch is reporting that President Buhari has sent this off to the National Assembly. And so, hopefully, Vice President Osibanjo, when he was having his discussion with the African Report magazine, he talked about them pushing this through, and hopefully in about 2 to 3 weeks, this being made law by the National Assembly. So essentially, from what's been reported by the Punch, they're going to do away with the NNPC, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. It's going to be replaced by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL. Also, they're saying that the Minister of Petroleum basically is going to incorporate the NNPCL, the new body, going to be incorporated by the Ministry of Petroleum, and also along with the Minister of Finance, they're going to determine NNPC's assets and liabilities that will be inherited by this new firm. Whatever assets or liabilities are not inherited by the new firm proposed in the petroleum industry bill, it's going to essentially saying it's going to be discarded or sold at some point. Also, they talked about ownership of shares in the NNPC Limited shall be vested in the government at incorporation and held by the Ministry of Finance on behalf of the government. The bill also proposes the establishment of an agency known as the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission, which will be responsible for the technical and commercial regulation of upstream petroleum operations. They also talk about having a midstream and downstream petroleum regulatory authority known as, quotes, the authority. But they're getting rid of the NNPC, or proposed to do away with the NNPC and replace it, and also the Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency. So the oil and gas sector has been waiting for this to happen for quite a while. The President Obasanjo tried to get this through. President Goodluck Jonathan tried to get this through. They broke it down into 4: Petroleum Industry Governance Bill and other bills. They still couldn't get it through. So hopefully, I guess 3rd or 4th time's a charm. They can pass this. They can pass this through. Now, the reason, I told you I was staying up until 3 a.m. when I saw Mele Kyari's tweet. One of the reasons why I stayed up was because of this massive news about Donald Trump's taxes. I want to link this to Nigeria. There's 2 tweets here on this bombshell that the New York Times has come out with, saying that he only paid $750 in tax when he first got into office in 2016, and then paid another $750 in 2017. This is from Juliet Kayem. She's a Harvard law professor and former Department of Homeland Security, saying that excessive debt is viewed as a national security vulnerability and generally means no security clearance allowed. Why? Not only because the debt-ridden person is desperate, but because the entity loaning has undue influence over that person. Also, another tweet here from Josh Campbell. He is a security correspondent, I guess, with CNN also, saying that worth noting that he's repeating the same point. Significant delinquent debt disqualifies most people from obtaining a government security clearance. U.S. government views it as a vulnerability and a point of leverage for foreign adversaries seeking access to classified information. Ironically, here's a tweet from Trump back in 2012 when he was going after Obama repeatedly on Twitter. He says, Barack Obama, who wants us to raise all our taxes, only pays 20% of his $790,000 salary. Do as I say, not as I do. I think that comes out to about $158,000, but he only ended up paying $750,000. This is highlighting why assets need to be declared by public officers in Nigeria when we talk about asset declarations on one hand. But also, if we take it to Vice President Osibanjo's discussion, the webinar, where he talked to the Africa Reports, and he was talking about bouncing back in commemoration of the 60th Independence Day celebration. he was asked, if we look at, I mean, we don't have the sound here, but if you look at him talking to Patrick Smith, I believe is his name, yes, the editor-in-chief, he asked Vice President Osinbajo, because of the revenue crunch that Nigeria is facing, is he going to raise taxes on the wealthiest Nigerians? And Professor Osinbajo said, no, now is not the time to be raising taxes on Nigerians. I'm contrasting what's going on in America because the tax issue there is so big. You've got, you know, it's an issue because it's a revenue driver for the government. So here is Professor Osinbajo saying that now is not the time to raise taxes. However, Labour feels that the increase in electricity tariffs and the increase in PMS are both taxes that are being increased on, technically taxes that are being increased on everyday Nigerians. So that's one hand on Labour's justification. On the other, Nigeria has to look at raising taxes on the wealthiest. I don't know if it's going to be a fuel tax where people that drive luxury cars or SUVs will pay 2 or 3% like they do in California, where I think it's 5 or 6% that's paid when you buy fuel. But somewhere you have to come out of this revenue crunch because this is what is delaying the talks between Labour. I mean, this is what is going to overshadow the talks between Labour and the government as to what to do with regards to electricity tariffs, because the government can't continue to subsidize. So the revenue has to come from somewhere, and it probably has to be an increase in taxes. I think the top 1% or so pay, I think it's 24 or 25% effective tax rates in Nigeria. But in South Africa, it's like 40%, UK almost 50%. I mean, Nigeria has to look at that. But that's our update, basically.
Rotus, I see the point you are making as an economist about the need for people to pay taxes. But already haven't we raised taxes in Nigeria?
The richest doctor.
Through petrol, through electricity.
Right.
And if you look at the electricity sector, what has been done, the template that was published by the NERC, people will get more hours of electricity, 16 to 20 hours. They pay more electricity than people who do not get up to 12 hours, whose tariffs will seem to have been frozen. So isn't that a case of getting the rich who consume more electricity to subsidize the poor who do not use as much electricity? As for President Trump, well, before I go to that point, and then again, beyond taxation, shouldn't we be constructing the conversation around reducing the cost of governance? If you are talking about revenue crunch, I mean, the bulk of our revenue goes into the maintenance of people who are doing very little work and are enjoying excessive privileges. Because, you know, they have access to state resources. As for President Trump, well, this issue of his tax is one of the most controversial things in the United States. And, you know, he's been gaming the tax code. Paying less than other people, even nurses and firefighters and school teachers pay more than $750 that he paid in 2016 and again in 2017. But if it becomes an election issue, and I wouldn't be surprised if it comes up tomorrow in the debate with Vice President Joe Biden, it could damage him heavily. Although he says it's fake news, that it is not true, he insists that he has immunity. And there have been cases in court all the way to the Supreme Court to allow prosecutors and investigators access to his tax records. This story has just been brought to the fore by New York Times, which he and his team are denying. But I won't be surprised, as I said, if it's an issue.
If I could add here about Donald Trump, he sounds exactly like his former New York nemesis, Leona Helmsley, that paying taxes is for little people. And a lesson needs to be taught to people like him, because it was taught to her. She ended up in jail. What he did, apart from Barack Obama and that hypocrisy, he also went after Eduardo Severin, the Facebook co-founder, who renounced his American citizenship because of high taxes. Donald Trump flayed him on Twitter. Donald Trump flayed a lot of the 1% and claimed that many of them don't pay taxes as if he does. He's clearly a hypocrite, and the emperor has been proved to have no clothes on. And it just goes to show this whole assertion a lot of people made that he's a con man who gamed the tax system and the public. It's looking very much like that, because that whole image that he built of himself as this huge business mogul who is what America needs, is going to get America's economy jump-started. He can't even get his own personal finances. His whole business empire is in tatters, and his children are complicit in this tax evasion, there are a lot of questions to be answered. And that his little dog whistle of this is how the Tea Party is also treated, constantly throwing little bones to his base, is not going to fly.
Indeed.
Some Democrats might be saying, lock him up somewhere now, but it's fine, all right? We're moving on to...
I would have loved to comment on the PIB, but there will be another opportunity because it's a very interesting development
it is.
that we are now focusing on it.
All right, moving on to business update. Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Great to have you, Michael.
Morning. Yeah, I'll start with Asia as I normally do. China industrial profits very good over the weekend. They're still down about 4%, but they've been taken as being a good indicator that there's a strong recovery going on in China, and another indication of it. And that should be confirmed on Wednesday when we get commercial and official PMIs from China. So therefore, Asian equity markets took it quite well this morning. And obviously after that strong rebound on Friday, as far as New York equities were concerned. A judge has blocked, remember we were talking about TikTok last week and this complicated way in which it's going. A judge has blocked an order from the Trump administration that would have banned TikTok from being downloaded from US app stores. So that's been blocked for the moment, but still the terms of the eventual deal to create a US-based TikTok Global, as I understand it's now being called, will still remain in flux. ByteDance, Oracle, Walmart still needing to finalise the ownership structure of the new entity. No surprise there. It'd be very interesting to find out who eventually ends up controlling it. Let me take you through a European recap then. Low note on Friday as far as European markets were concerned. Now here's some coronavirus impact on that. France registered a record new number of coronavirus cases on Thursday. Netherlands also. Spain is struggling. There was a thought over the weekend that maybe the Madrid would actually be closed down completely. It didn't come into effect, but nonetheless, everything is very serious. And on Friday, the DAX 30 and the CAC 40 fell to their lowest levels since August and late May. Here in the UK, the FTSE 100, FTSE 250 finished higher on Friday, but it's worth noting that after that winter economy plan was talked about, was unveiled last week, we talked about that, companies it didn't really affect the market too much, but companies will be encouraged to keep on furloughed staff as the government pay a proportion of their wages, as we were saying. But the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Finance Minister, made it very clear that not every job will be saved. Now, as far as the US is concerned, it's reported the Democrats were coming to a sort of 2.4 trillion coronavirus relief package. Remember, they originally asked for 3 trillion. The political stalemate between the Republicans and Democrats has been going on for 2 months. This probably will still be too high for Republicans. And the US tech sector actually just... completely independent of everything that's going on. NASDAQ up 2% and 1% respectively. Big names in the tech sector like Amazon, Netflix, Apple, Alphabet all gained in excess of 2%. The UK and EU trade talks continue. It's understood there's a bit more optimism about it, but there are key areas, fishing and also state aid, that are still absolute stumbling blocks. It's understood that a deal is sort of in the offing, but I'll believe that when I see it. I think this will go straight down to the wire, and we only have less than a month left to finalise it all. And overall, let me give you some... This may well strike a chord with you in Nigeria, but over here, the feeling, apart from Sunak buying some time, the real test is going to be when people actually try to find new jobs. And there's also a lot of doubts here about the wisdom of a lockdown. Now, what we're seeing major parts of the country go into lockdown again. Over the weekend, a lot of people have been saying there's a gap between what the so-called experts and specialists are saying, who have no interest, and probably some of them have never actually worked in the private sector, and they are actually saying, you know, we should lock down, and we're calling into, I mean, it may be that the Parliament itself now will have a vote as to whether there'll be a lockdown down in various areas or not. That'd be handy for the government because it takes away the blame from Boris Johnson's top team. If things start to go wrong, they can blame it on Parliament. But still, there is this debate now going on as to have we been listening to the wrong people. I would suggest that's slightly too late, but there we are. We're getting more talk about negative interest rates here. One particular, she is an external rate setter from the Bank of England, but she's been talking about it. She said that the policy had yielded positive results in countries that had tried it. Again, the question to ask is, what did it mean for the bank sector? Will they actually be making any profits or not? And again, something that may chime with you is the use of high streets, the use of shops, the use of big shops now. People are more and more online, and there's a feeling that offices and that shops will be turned into temporary offices and also flats, in other words, apartments, accommodation. About 1,400 high street stores have closed down, so there's plenty of property space for that. So we may be seeing fundamental change in the way that property is used. So this last week of the quarter promises to be slightly more exciting, but as you mentioned, the highlight is undoubtedly going to be the presidential debate. President Trump, fresh from those reports, as you mentioned, he paid a grand total of $750 in tax in federal income between 2016 and 2017. He's already set the tone for the debate, demanding that Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, as he calls him, takes a drug test before and after the debate. I mean, it does get into this kind of crazy politics and throwing mud arena, but we'll see how it goes. Activity, therefore, as Asia is sort of China's close towards the second half of the week, but there's a torrent of data coming out of the US. We've got GDP, got personal income, and we've also got the all-important jobs figures on Friday, with the hiring of US Census workers rolling out of the data. Now that's quite a big chunk of things. Jobs growth expected to shrink to between 850,000 and 900,000, and of course those effects of the stimulus have well and truly run out of the system. So unfortunately, what we're seeing here is that US politics is very much, as I mentioned, and it'll be underlined by the debate tomorrow, very much marching to its own tune, really, and much to the frustration, not just observers, not just of the general public in the United States, but also the Fed. Oil steady and gold steady. That's all right around it.
All right. Thank you so much for that. I just wanted to, talk quickly about Brexit and the negotiations. They say deals in the offing. Can you really believe them? Because it looks like though every deal we hear today is in the offing can be turned around tomorrow by somebody that feels, I could have done it this way, which is Boris Johnson. And it goes to show a lot about politicians, just like what is happening to Trump as regards his tax returns in America as we speak today. But is there really a deal in the offing? Is there really a deal that will negate what had been agreed upon before in the offing for the UK?
Here's the thing. I think that whatever happened, there will be a deal. I'm pretty sure about that. The shape of it, I'm not sure about at all. It will go down to the wire. But you have to bear in mind, it's not just about the UK, it's about Europe as well. And there is a big feeling that Europe actually needs the UK, not quite as much as we need it in volume terms of exports, but in terms of sentiment, there is still a link between the offshore islanders, which is us, and continental Europe. And I think as a result of that, there will be some sort of deal. I have no idea what the shape of it will be. I'm not encouraged by the fact that fishing rights, particularly, and also state aid are two big sticking points. But we'll see major politicians come into that. Something has to be agreed. And the reason that it has to be agreed is quite simply that the central experiment, the central project of the EU does not want to see a negotiation failing. What they want to see is very very hard terms being brought on anybody that dare question what it's doing, that dare leave it in the way that the UK is, because there are lots of other populist risings around the less populous, sorry, the less profitable parts of the EU right now, the fringe countries that joined later than the big ones, and they're still wondering, why are we doing this? Why do we have no control over our own economies? So I think there are strains there, and that may give some kind of leverage to some sort of deal, but like everybody else, we have no idea what that will actually be, but it will go down to the wire, no question about that.
Well, quickly, Michael, how much value should we place on the reprieve that TikTok and WeChat got from the courts? TikTok yesterday, WeChat much earlier, considering the fact that President Trump is even considering an outright ban in early November.
Yeah, so that's one thing. It hasn't gone to the Supreme Court yet. It's just a judge who's done that. So that's number one. So the legal process is not over. But I think the most interesting thing about both these is who actually is going to run them. Who's going to actually run TikTok? Will it be Walmart? Will it be or will it be Oracle itself? This is a difficult one. I have no idea how it's actually going to work. Walmart clearly wants the deal for its own social-facing marketing, whereas Oracle is stepping into this, wanting it for the same kind of reason. But is Larry Ellison going to control it, or will it be given to Walmart? These are two huge companies, and I think once we need to see what the corporate framework is going to be before we can form any judgment, and also obviously to see how the Chinese bureaucracy allows this to happen, because this has still got to be subject to an export license in China, so it's all deeply complicated. Right. But I know nothing about these international affairs. All I can tell you is my interest. What will the corporate framework be?
All right, thank you so much for that very insightful one there, Michael Wilson. For update on COVID-19 pandemic, Aaron Akirjala is here. Aaron, hi. How are you? Hello, Aaron.
Quite damning for Manchester City, but moving away from that.
Woo! Woo! You've been lestered.
Okay.
You've been lestered.
Good morning to you, Tundu.
I told you to stay off Tundu. That's what happens. That's what you get when you don't stay off Tundu.
But I cannot help it. I cannot help it. Understanding that this morning she's actually looking like a reincarnated archangel, all decked out in white, I must say. Let me
tell you who she looks
like. Good morning to you.
Can we get on with this program?
Yeah, can we get on with the program?
Aaron, she's looking like Jamie Vardy to you now.
All right, starting off, looking at the global figures in terms of COVID-19, let's look at the outlook for today and how things have actually played out across the weekend. Now, as it stands right now, we've actually crossed 33 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 as we edge closer to the very, very grim figure, which will be the total deaths, almost getting to the 1 million mark in terms of numbers across 188 regions. Trying to dimension it further, if we look at the statistics, you get to find out, if they can help us with the slide, you can see that there is a rise in terms of COVID-19 and how things are actually playing out there. And there's an upshoot. If they can help us with the graph, please, we would actually appreciate it. There's actually an upshoot in the number of confirmed cases. You can actually see that it's actually up by 8%, which is actually not too good. And also, although the deaths are actually slowing down, we're seeing a regression in the number of deaths that are being accounted for. All right, this tally being done by the Johns Hopkins University. All right, we can see that it is actually down in the last 14-day period. It's down by 9%. Which might be a little bit good, but we are getting closer and closer to that particular green milestone of 1 million confirmed deaths from COVID-19, looking like the worst we'd ever see. We're not in humanity. So at the moment, we're still looking at these things and still wrapping our minds around the numbers. And India is actually accounting for so much of this. Looking at the outlook in India right now, India have confirmed that as of this morning, over 6 million confirmed cases actually in India, although it is down by -9% in the last 14 days, alongside deaths over 95,542 in the last 24 hours. hours, they've had over 1,000 deaths, which is minus 5%. But that's still looking at it. India is the second worst, most infected country in the world. As they say right now, 1 in every 3 cases of COVID-19 around the world is from India. 1 in every 5 cases of COVID-19 around the world, deaths around the world is from India. So you can see there, Maharashtra still being the epicenter of COVID-19 in India. You can see the number of cases there spread across just 10 states, majorly with the Karnataka, and not forgetting Tamil Nadu, Delhi, and West Bengal, Bahia, and some of these places we're seeing major rise in numbers. And also looking at the deaths, if we can actually press it further today, you can actually see reported deaths there also still rising, but actually having a little bit of dip. That's what actually brought about that minus 9%. As it stands right now, the only silver lining in this very dark cloud for India, as they are getting closer to the United States, who have confirmed numbers of 7.1, is the fact that at the moment, their recovery rate stands at 86%, which is quite comforting for the government. And they are claiming that they are doing things right, expanding testing and also creating capacity in their health sector to ensure that they can probably check COVID-19. But when you have over 1.3 billion people to deal with, certainly Narendra Modi is one man on the hot seat. Moving away from that, quickly, let's look at how things are actually playing out in Europe. Yes?
Quickly, before you move on. Yes, the figures about India, those figures are correct. And in 2 weeks, if the infection rate continues at this rate, India could even overtake the United States.
Yeah.
But the good news from India is that they also have the highest recovery rate in the world, 82%.
Yeah.
So I don't know what accounts for that, but that's the situation.
And we've spoken to that effect that they've looked at some of these things, just like what we're seeing in Africa, because when you look at the case fatality ratio, the CFR, also India is also very low, same as Africa. And they're saying that things probably is owing to the fact that other coronaviruses might, in time past, common cold, SARS, MERS, might have contributed in creating some kind of immunity for those people. Things like malaria, some other illnesses, drugs that people have taken might create some kind of immunity. So people there are a lot of asymptomatic people in India, same as we're seeing in Africa also, whereby they were expecting Africa to be overrun with deaths. Save South Africa, cases have been very mild in the rest of Africa. Now, moving away from that, we're seeing places in Europe where we'll be expecting that things should go well. In Spain, where we are beginning to see rises in numbers, there are still protestations still going on in Vallecas, as they are still claiming that the government hasn't done enough in the health sector, that they need to do more. And even though we're seeing rises in cases, protestations are still going on, which shouldn't be, because events like this, we know we've been speaking about the right of every individual to actually protest, but events like this turn to super spreaders. Although we are seeing people with masks, but nevertheless, it can never be too safe, especially when you talk about social distancing, which is clearly being violated from the pictures we're actually seeing. Same as what is happening in Israel, because looking at Israel right now, these are citizens gathered in the residence of Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been under immense pressure ever since he reintroduced some stricter measures of lockdown. We know that there are major rises in cases in Israel, but nevertheless, if there are major rises in cases in Israel and people are protesting that Netanyahu should quit as the prime minister, going into the streets and protesting like this might just not be the best idea, because we are seeing major rises in how things are playing out in Israel. Same as France also, although we hear in France that at the moment restaurants will actually be closed, more restrictions are being taken in France to ensure that they curb the rise of COVID-19, because if they can actually help us with the graph from France, you find out that there are also major rises in cases going on there. Okay, since we cannot do that, before I come to you guys today, let's actually get into Nigeria. Nigeria, a lot has been happening in Nigeria in terms of COVID-19. And I know we should be having Chike Ikwazu here, but the good news is, I don't know if this is really a good news, because these are the actual figures right now. Over 500,000 tests has been done as of date. But before we come into the testing, there are 4 states. You can actually see, not going back to that particular first one, you can actually see that there are 4 states at the moment who have actually gone without a single infection in 20 days. We have 36 states in Nigeria, and you can see the number that is actually reflected there. So many states, and either so many states are not testing enough, but at the moment we are seeing several states that are actually not coming back with any kind of figures. 4 states in the last 20 days have not recorded a single case of COVID-19 in Nigeria, which includes Borno, Kebbi, Zamfara, and Kogi. Kogi, as a matter of fact, has not even appeared in their updates in the last 23 days, which is quite worrying, understanding that I don't think COVID-19 has shrunk that badly or shrunk that well in Nigeria, because Chike Yekwazu has also warned, as we're actually moving on, that when we look at the number of testing done, because first of all, look at the outlook of Nigeria there, you can see the projection. Although the cases have actually dropped, some are saying that testing is not being done. Under testing, under reporting might be accounting for the heavy drop in numbers or the cases plateauing there. But nevertheless, there are talks, as we move on to the next one, there are talks, as this particular graph would actually explain, that in the last 7 days, you can actually see that the number of tests that has been conducted is actually lesser than the number of tests that was conducted the week before. The week before had over 31,000 tests done, and just last week we have over 30,000 tests done, but the number of cases are rising. So there is a massive contradiction in what we are seeing there, because if the number of cases, you can actually see that the week before had 968, where they tested over 31,000, and last week when they tested over 30,000, they had over 1,053. So this actually contradicts the fact that we're having states without COVID-19, because clearly there's still COVID-19 in Nigeria.
Well, thank you very much.